Okay, Sandy Powell, you're no stranger to recreating period in the films that you've worked on. Tell us what you did with Carol, how you went about recreating some of the fashions of the 1950s.
Well, I started with a bunch of research, obviously, having read the script and having met with Todd. Um, in fact, Todd gave everybody, all the creatives on the film, a lookbook full of images that he'd been looking at. Everything that was going through his mind, all the references he'd been looking at, he compiled into one book, which he gave to us, which was a real great head start. And after that, I did my own research, which was looking at photography from the period, street photography, and also fashion photography, but fashion really only for the character of Carol. Everybody else is pretty ordinary looking and not high fashion.
Hmm. Well, right. I mean, that says a lot about who those characters are, in terms of class and society and economic. Can you talk a bit more about that? Just making those decisions about those characters.
Well, obviously, I had to differentiate between Carol and Teresa's characters because they come from entirely different backgrounds. And for Carol's character, who is middle class, wealthy, sophisticated, she obviously could afford, great, expensive, fashionable clothes. So I wanted to show that in the clothing. So her clothes are sort of finely tailored, expensive looking, muted, restrained colors, fur. I mean, just that sort of, I wanted her to have a sense of luxury and sophistication. And Therese was, I would have assumed recently an art student, so, very little means. And really, her appearance is not her main priority. Her clothing isn't her main priority. It's sort of functional, comfortable. She has to wear a certain style of clothing to work. But then you sort of, throughout the story, you see her character develops. She grows up in a sense, and then her style changes at the end when she can finally afford to buy herself new clothes. And that's where we see her kind of change into a more grown-up, sophisticated look, obviously inspired or influenced by Carol, but not exactly emulating her.
Right. There's a very interesting specific color palette in this film as well that I noticed when I was watching it. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. A lot of that came from, again, the initial images that were provided by Todd. A lot of the photographs that he was using as reference were by Saul Leiter, the photographer Saul Leiter. And I noticed in those, I mean, they might be photographs of, they're all photographs of street scenes, New York, and a lot of them are at night, or a lot of them are in rain or dark. And then there were always highlights of color, like little spots of red or yellow, whether they were in traffic lights or neon signs or taxi cabs. And that kept sort of occurring to me, that those little highlights of color were in there. And I use that in certain areas. For instance, the beret and the scarf that Therese wears with the red and the yellow. Cate wears the red coat once, and then the coral color of her scarf against the more muted tones. And the rest of the palette really is muted colors. I didn't want anything to be distracting, and it's about real people in a real time. And actually, a lot of the muted colors that Carol wears are quite fashionable colors. So it sort of worked in that I didn't want anything to be too overwhelming or overpowering within the story, and just using those little highlights of color. I don't know whether that's the color palette you're referring to, but that's certainly what I was thinking.
Right. No, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
The colors that were in the movie. It's also, I mean,
no, but I don't know whether you're referring to I don't know whether you're referring to the specific little highlights of bright color, or whether the whole palette was quite low key and muted.
Right. No, that's what I was referring to. It's also, when we meet Carol, she's at sort of a crossroads in her life. Her marriage is falling apart. She's kind of finding out who she is in a lot of ways. I'm just wondering if that influence the way that you designed the clothing for her?
I don't think I thought about her life falling apart. I think that how she's dressed in the beginning when we see her, when Therese first meets her, is how she is in her life, in her home life. I mean, you know, just because she's kind of separated from her husband hasn't changed the way that she's dressed. She always dresses in that rather conventional but fashionable way. Yet that does change when she gets to Therese and she's away from her home environment. She's away from the confines of her husband's family and the restrictions. And she allows herself to relax a little. And I take her out. She's not wearing the suits or the dress. She's in separate. She's in trousers and sweater sets and comfortable jackets. Her hair isn't quite so perfectly done. And there's a more sort of relaxed feeling about it. That was deliberate. And the same with Therese. She does get a little bit more colourful once she hits the roads with Carroll.
Right. I mean, all that stuff is really, I mean, I think it's taken for granted in costume design, working from the thematic and metaphorical aspects. You know, it's not just about designing pretty clothes for people to wear.
No, not at all.
Right. It really says something about the characters and what, you know, stage they're at. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about working with Todd Haynes. I mean, he's someone who's known for having a very specific visual style, you know, very unique. And, you know, what's it like working with someone like that?
Todd is probably one of the best directors that I've ever worked with, if not the best. No, I shouldn't say that because I'll upset all the others. But, you know, I love working with Todd because he is a visual director and he has very, very specific understanding of visuals. I don't think all his films look the same visually at all, but you know that whatever he does is going to have a really unique look. I mean, I think they're all different, and I think that's what's so satisfying working with somebody like that, because he gives you so much information to begin with. I mean, Martin Scorsese is the same. He will actually bombard you with images, particularly films. I mean, you have to watch a whole ton of films before you work on a Marty job. And what you're doing is you're getting inside your director's head. You're actually seeing the things that get them excited and get them going, and that really helps. That helps considerably with where to go, even if you don't literally take what they're showing you as reference. You just by knowing what they're looking at and what excites them really enables you to help create their vision, which is what my job is to help create the director's vision and create the characters and help the actors find their characters.
Right. Does it get easier with each film? I mean, you've done quite a few, and you've worked with all these great directors over, you know, decades now. You know,
does it get easier? I think obviously experience helps. Mm-hmm. Certain things get easier. Yes, you learn how to. I think what you learn how to do is how to cope with people and personalities, because that's such a huge part of the job. The designing bit's easy. Actually. Mm-hmm. Having ideas and working with clothes and materials and all the rest of it is actually the easy bit, and the bit it's the smallest bit. Mostly what your job is dealing with people and characters and collaborating. And I think the more you do, the kind of easier it gets in a way, but that's not to say that it's a completely easy job, because every job has different challenges and you always face new problems and new hurdles, and quite often a job is just about solving problems.
Right.
As well as designing things and making it look nice.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you very much.